Many of us have childhood memories that bring us a sense of nostalgia, or maybe you remember the fairy tales, songs, or stories read at bedtime. But some of those stories are far less innocent than we remember, or have rather heinous origins. The nursery rhyme Three Blind Mice at face value seems like an ordinary, innocent tune, but some historians draw parallels between the rhyme and events that occurred during Queen Mary I of England's rule from 1553 to 1558. An adamant Roman Catholic, she executed around 300 Protestant people, earning herself the title of Bloody Mary. It's speculated that three particular victims, Protestant loyalists who were burned at the stake, are the subjects of the popular nursery rhyme. The three men were accused of plotting to assassinate the queen, mirrored by the line of the song, "They all ran after the farmer's wife. She cut off their tails with a carving knife." The queen's husband, King Philip, owned many estates, including farmland, and the queen took her revenge by cutting off their tails, burning the men at the stake. This is only one of many nursery rhymes children sing, unaware of the word's darker meaning. Following the release of the 1961 animated film 101 Dalmatians, demand for Dalmatian puppies drastically increased by up to 30%, but Dalmatians were not all that their adopters expected them to be. Often bought as presents for children who were fans of the movie, parents neglected to research the personalities and training requirements of the breed. Dalmatians can be stubborn and even aggressive if not trained properly, and can be particularly impatient with children, nipping at them. Many parents disgruntled with their new dog's feisty nature and upkeep, who had expected them to be laid back, put the dogs back up for adoption. Unfortunately, many of the dogs were likely put into shelters or abandoned, or even put to sleep as an indirect result of the movie's popularity. The doe-eyed, well-intended Pinocchio of the 1940 Disney film is innocent compared to the original doll. The basic story remains the same. Pinocchio, a puppet created by a man named Geppetto, wants to become a real boy. But in the original story, Jiminy Cricket and Pinocchio are far from friends. After Jiminy tells Pinocchio to go home, the puppet is filled with rage at being bossed around, and he crushes Jiminy with a heavy hammer, killing him. After he tells Geppetto that it was all the cricket's fault and that he did not want to kill him, karma catches up with Pinocchio when he later burns his feet off by resting them on a stove. Pinocchio then hears that by planting gold coins, a gold tree will grow. The spirit of Jiminy Cricket warns Pinocchio not to bury the coins, but the puppet doesn't listen. Nearby townspeople catch the puppet in the act and accuse him of hiding gold, for which they hang him. In the story, Pinocchio survives despite being hanged, but even so, the original version shows a far more violent underbelly to a well-known children's movie, reminding us that Disney isn't all fun and games. The word glee conjures feelings of happiness, or makes one think of the popular musical show that ran from 2009 to 2015, but one member of the cast was anything but cheerful. Mark Salling, who portrays the popular Noah Puckerman on the show, was arrested in 2015 for a large stash of child pornography. Over 100,000 images and videos were discovered from his laptop, USB flash drive, and hard drive. Salling has pled not guilty, and the final hearing has been repeatedly delayed, reportedly because he wants to settle the case out of court. Radar Online reported that the next court hearing will take place on May 30th, 2017. Charles Dickens, renowned author of the family classic A Christmas Carol, grew up in an environment of poverty and darkness. His entire family, with the exception of one sister, were imprisoned. Much like the children in his stories, he lived in a rat-infested house and was abused and neglected, which influenced the somber tone in his writing. What so few people know is the influence this had on his personality. Quick-tempered, Dickens often neglected and even physically abused his wife and gave his children little attention, despite the fact he had 10 of them. Dickens was so unhappy in his marriage, he began dating a 19-year-old woman at the age of 45, writing a letter to his actual wife accusing her of mental instability. The letter was later released to the public so all could see that not all of Charles Dickens' writing was based purely in fiction. Lewis Carroll, author of the children's books such as Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, had a dark and chaotic past. While there is still some contention regarding the truth of this case, a BBC documentary released in 2015 claimed Lewis was repressing a dark urge. The character Alice was based off of the author's neighbor's daughter, Alice Liddell. The documentary alleges that researchers found a photo of Alice's older sister completely nude in an inappropriate, suggestive pose, looking rather uncomfortable. The photo was found in a museum with an inscription reading, "Property of Lewis Carroll and Lorena Liddell," taken at a time when the age of consent was just 12 years old. Vanessa Tate, the great-granddaughter of Alice Liddell, said she believed that Lewis was in love with Alice and that anyone who said he wasn't a strange man was simply wrong. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is perceived to be a children's tale, but through the eyes of its author may be something much more twisted. Italian poet Giambattista Basile wrote the original story of Sleeping Beauty, and it is a much darker tale than the Disney version many are familiar with. The very beginning foretells a prophecy that the king's daughter, Talia, will prick her finger on a splinter of flax or hemp. In place of Maleficent, an old woman spins the thread that Talia pricks her finger on. When Talia does not wake, the distraught king locks her up forever. One day, a passing hunter uncovers her and sexually violates her in her sleep. Talia gives birth to his child while still in a comatose state, only waking when the child sucks on her finger. She falls in love with the hunter who impregnated her, only to find out he's married, and his wife is reasonably distraught. In revenge, the wife orders the chef to cook up Talia's child and serve it to them at supper. Thinking the baby is dead, she reveals her plot to the king, but the chef didn't follow through with the order, thankfully. The king burnt the wife alive, and a twisted happily ever after followed. The story of The Little Mermaid has been popularized by Disney through its 1989 animated adaptation. The original story by Hans Christian Andersen was not the happily ever after version that many know and love. In the original story, the Little Mermaid falls in love with a handsome prince above the water. After a storm hits and she saves his life by leaving him in the care of women at a temple, she makes a dark deal with the Sea Witch. For sacrificing her beautiful voice, she will gain legs that feel like walking on knives, but she will be a dancer that surpasses any other human. If the prince falls in love and marries her by dawn, she will gain a soul and can be with him, but if he doesn't, she will turn into sea foam. She agrees to the terms and seeks out the prince, who wants to marry the woman who saved him. Without her voice, the mermaid cannot tell the prince it was her, so he marries a woman from the temple. The Little Mermaid is offered one last chance to live. She must kill the prince with a knife from the Sea Witch. Even upon seeing the prince sleeping with his bride, she cannot bring herself to kill him, and she flings herself into the sea, turning into foam. One of the saddest stories here is that of Judith Barsi, a young budding actress and the voice of Ducky in the animated film The Land Before Time. Although she was born in America, her family was Hungarian. Her father, Joseph, had a history of mental and physical abuse, threatened to kill himself, and was arrested 3 times for drunk driving. Once, Judith told a friend that he threw pots and pans at her, resulting in a nosebleed. Joseph also threatened to slit Judith and her mother's throat and burn down their house. The stress from home life was so overwhelming, Judith pulled out all of her eyelashes. But things took a turn for the worst on the evening of July 15, 1988. Joseph shot Judith in the head while she was asleep, ending both her flourishing acting career and her life permanently. After killing his wife, he poured gasoline on the bodies and lit them on fire, went to the garage, and shot himself in the head. The promising future of a young budding actress snuffed out by the man meant to protect her. The world knew him as Dr. Seuss, but the man behind the pen name, Theodore Seuss Geisel, was anything but a pure soul. Theodore's first wife, Helen Palmer, also a children's author, suffered several severe illnesses over 13 years, including cancer. Instead of being by her side, Theodore was sleeping with Helen's friend Audrey Stone Diamond. When Helen found out, she penned a suicide letter to her husband. "I feel myself in a spiral going down, 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 into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness. I love you so much. I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed." Helen committed suicide in 1957, thinking of Theodore and his reputation, despite the pain he'd caused her. Audrey and Dr. Seuss continued their relationship and later married, until Dr. Seuss's passing in 1991. That's all for now. If you'd like to fight to keep creepy content on YouTube, consider giving even $1 to my Patreon, linked in the description below. With your help, we can keep YouTube creepy. Thanks for listening. Now be sure to check out another one of my videos, and of course, be sure to subscribe to my channel by pressing on screen now, because you won't want to miss what's next. And I'll see you next time.